Welcome to the Strategy Mob Podcast. Tune in for everything you need to know to stay in the know regarding the automotive industry. Here's your host, Jason Harris.
Hey, what's going on, Podcast Nation? It is Jason Harris here, and thank you for joining me on another episode of Strategy Mob. No idea why I always lower my voice every single time I say that,
Very
but
cool.
it's just fun.
It is.
Hey, for everybody out there that's
Strategy
watching
Mob.
and listening right now, today's going to be an awesome day because you get to meet the oh-so-famous Miss Fleming Ford. Thank you, Fleming, for taking the time to come jam with us today.
Thank you, Jason. I was really looking forward to it. Love listening to you.
I know we both had kind of those days that are just kind of like go, but we finally got to connect. So it's like, I'm really excited. And I've been looking forward to this one because I think we're going to cover some subjects in depth that have been touched on, but really haven't been dived into. So it's actually going to be a really fun podcast. But before we get into what we want to talk today, I thought it'd be cool to kick off the podcast with a little origin story. Just so everyone out there's got some context. So Fleming, how did you get started in this crazy little world we call the automotive industry?
Well, I thought I was an amazing salesperson, but what I come to find out is because my name is Fleming Ford, I would get into every GM because they thought I was calling to do a dealer trade, thinking I was a dealership. And so unlike a lot of salespeople who could never get past the gatekeeper, I had hundreds of conversations with GMs when I was like 25 years old. And I, at the time, worked on how do you hire and the right people and then retain them. So it was more of like a whole hiring process and how do you really identify good salespeople and the right technicians and so forth. And so fortunately, we have always had that problem and we still do. So I'm evidently not doing a very good job at that. So I ended up with having the vertical in automotive because I had so many automotive clients for my consulting company.
Mm-hmm.
And we moved into really then, if you're going to hire the right people, you've got to have a good culture and a good place to bring them or you're still going to turn them over. So we kind of moved our consulting into, the people strategy around a dealership. So how do you grow a dealership through getting the best people and keeping them and also getting productivity and engagement through, really the highest probably advantage of a dealership is going to have, be the people side of it.
It's our biggest asset for sure, 100%.
Absolutely. And you can really walk into a dealership and you can feel that as if it's an asset or a disadvantage, so you're right. When you walk into a dealership, you can feel the energy. And I always tell a GM, I'm like, it's reflective of your ability, what I see on the floor or what I see in the bay when I pull up. I mean, how people are responsive, how much they're engaging with each other, what their attitudes are. I mean, are they hopping up to help? Are they greeting you? Are they, everybody's busy and has some, like some real rhyme or reason to their day, but you can actually feel how great the leadership is, which is also, you can't grow the dealership without the leadership. So we know that is always kind of like a first starting point of like assessing where a store is at and where we might need to go.
No, that's true. I mean, look, the people are our assets. They're ultimately at the end of the day what's going to bring us success. Like, here's one thing I've found consistent with all the dealerships that I've ever visited out there. Happy employees have always made for happy customers. And I feel like a lot of times in our right? I mean, I know it's a simple idea and simple strategy,
right,
but a lot more difficult to execute. It's simple in nature, but to execute happy,
very difficult.
Yeah, to execute happy employees, you really have to process the crap out of it. It's like I feel like it's almost kind of like going to the gym to work out. Like you have to create a routine and a series of processes to consistently maintain a level of happiness with your staff. And I'm sure that you've probably have consulted or worked with that, and you've seen that actually in play. You can almost feel it, right? So, for the dealerships out there that are agreeing with us and shaking their heads up and down, going, yeah, you guys are right. Like, I mean, it's an area of focus that I need to be on. And I think especially right now, given the situation that we're in, going into Q4 and we're hitting those colder months. So you're in Florida. You don't actually ever get to feel those. So a little envy.
It's a brisk 55 today. We got our like long
you know
sleeves
what?
on.
I don't want to hear it. It's snowing outside right now, so like 55. And I'm like, that's short weather and sandals.
Yes, exactly.
but it is good timing to really kind of have the discussion and make sure that there is a strategy legitimately around how do we keep staff motivated and happy. And I'm sure you probably have some thoughts on this.
Well, and I'm glad you brought it up, Jason, because right now, so we do employee surveys, and what we're seeing right now when we're kind of records are being broken in terms of like pay and sales and things that are being accomplished in a lot of the stores, you think people would be happier and more engaged. And what we're seeing right now is this dip in our surveys in terms of employee happiness and engagement. And I think it is because when we're really busy and we're working lean, a lot of the times that we spent valuing the employees, caring about the employees, helping the employees grow and develop, we're now kind of just rushing around in the urgent.
Mm-hmm.
And the employees are feeling that on top of the pandemic. And so what I'm really encouraging my GMs right now to do, or all my managers, is make sure you are intentionally spending some time on the personal side of that person, because a lot of people are dealing with a lot of stress right now. So our well-being,
that's totally true.
And sometimes we think, oh, they're just making a lot of money and the store's doing awesome, they're probably fine. And actually right now people are in crises emotionally, and they're dealing with, no hope. And so it's a great time to really go to your team and make sure the GM's role right now is probably the most important thing that, they've ever had to do,
Mm-hmm.
is make sure their people are in a good space and they feel safe and secure and, see some.
How do you identify that? Look, I'm the first one to admit that my EQ is not way up there, right? It was something that I just had to I had to be aware of it. I had to be conscious about it when I was running my dealership. I was very just get stuff done. And I find a lot of entrepreneurs were just like that. We don't necessarily have a whole lot of emotion going through that, but it is so important right now. So what are some tips for some dealers out there to kind of identify, the individuals that are just having a bit of a rougher time?
And I feel you, because when I get busy, I'm not like what I call my niceness, my caring.
Yep.
I'm like, let's just go. I need this done, So I totally feel you. Sometimes I have to schedule it. Sometimes I let's put it on your calendar. You're going to do some one-on-one time with, an easy thing, especially in a bigger store. I have, and I can get it so they can download it. I do what I call coffee and combos. And so, would be you maybe pull a parts person, a service person, the receptionist, a sales person. So you put like a small 6 to 8, 9, 10 people together, and they have breakfast with the GM. And the GM just asks really good questions. What could we do differently? What could we do to make happier? So it's a nice way to get the GM to be relatable, because sometimes, my GMs are awesome. I mean, they really do care about the people. But I always say there's an IP gap, their intention,
Mm-hmm. Yep.
and then the perception, right? And so it breaks their heart sometimes on the surveys when the people are like, I don't even know who he is, and I'm like, so I don't know, some will say one of the other training groups a long time ago must have told GMs to walk through the back on their way in so that the service people get to see them. And so, I'm like, that's not enough, I
actually remember doing that. Yes.
And they're always very proud of it because somebody told them to do it. And so we actually did a study where we looked at why service technicians, we love to do studies, by the way, why service technicians were staying at their jobs or not, like what was driving it.
Mm-hmm.
And this last year, so out of the top 10 things, this last year, 3 of them were about the GM. And they've never been about, the GM never even gotten to the top 10 because they didn't used to go back there that much and it wasn't a big deal. But now people are looking at the GM, not just to produce results, but really to cast the vision and cast the why. Everybody is more about what's my purpose and do I matter? And people need to feel that, which sounds really soft and, but it's really such an impact on retention across the store. And an easy other thing you can do is just stop and say, Jason, hey, I was wondering, you're really good at, can you help me out with, what's your idea about, or, I want your thoughts on this. And that just builds people up,
I
and
like
it's
that.
free. It's free. But you have to make sure, almost like any goal, you have to really kind of put it on your calendar and say, I'm going to talk to 3 people today that I don't really know, and make sure they know I care about them. Because people right now are hurting. And sometimes we have to act tough and cool in the dealership. And so we don't always see that.
Yeah,
And
tough and cool is kind of the norm, right?
the
Like, it's
motto,
like,
yeah.
I mean, look,
Superhero. Yeah.
I owned a dealership. There's ups and downs. Financially, there's ups and downs.
Also,
Yeah, I can't tell you. I mean, I'd literally watch a bank account go from here to here to
right.
back up to here to over there, all within the same month. And you're just
You're
like,
funny.
holy jeez. It's
Yeah.
just deals were being funded and things were going out and cars were coming in.
Deals were
and
not
it's
being
just
funded,
Not
yeah.
being funded. And it's just so there's so much pressure. I agree with you. There's so much pressure. There's so much stress on that GM or that DP type role that it's like, we have to schedule it. I mean, I live and die by this thing, and I've learned to live and die by this thing. This was not natural for me. I had to force myself to do it. I mean, I've gotten to the point now where I actually have kid time scheduled
Yes.
between 6 p.m. and 8 p.m. And I think one of the coolest things now is I can preset do not disturb on my phone, where no notifications go
idea.
off, no phone calls
there.
happen, no nothing, and it's just like I need to have that time. And one of the things that I would do at my dealership was similar to kind of what you were talking about. Is like when I was walking by a salesperson's office, and I know that they had done, because I get the reports, like, and they closed this deal, or they closed this deal, or the technician closed this RO, and I just ask them, hey, how'd you do it?
Yes.
I may have already know the
Fabulous.
answer.
Right.
It didn't.
I love
It didn't even matter. But I mean, actually, I would love to watch my technicians, because, like, with a set of wrenches is the worst thing in the world. By the way,
Feel
like,
you. I would injure myself. Yes.
I would. I seriously would. So it's like I would have, sometimes it'd be fun. I would just see them, and I'm like, what are you doing up there? Like, what are you looking at? I want to. It was just. It was that 5 to 7 minutes where I could just kind of engage with them, and they felt like they taught me something, instead of always. I feel like DPs and GMs were always going to teach down. And
Yes.
and I feel like we
my
can earn
gosh,
so much
yeah.
respect, and we can get to a
And we
place where there's so much more open if
modeled
we
it.
do it upwards, right?
So much. And I think, it's just brilliant, the type of leadership style you have, because people will be loyal. People always are like, why can't I attract talent? Why can't I, there's nobody to hire. And I'm like, because you're the problem. Because, talent attracts talent. And if you are a great leader who is known and becomes known as coaching people and developing people and getting them up a level and caring and valuing people, not commanding and controlling, then people want to come work for you. This industry talks to each other. So, if that's where, and everybody wants me to start there with helping them get better people. And I'm like, let's talk about really the root of the problem. And, so often the role of GM has changed. It was always you were the best producer and like get everybody to produce more. But now you've really got to deal with a lot of psychological dysfunction, people who are dealing with different things, and you've got to learn to tap in and influence them, not because you told them to and you paid them, but because you wanted them to want to. Very different game than what we all kind of grew up with. And a lot of it is what you just did there gave that employee value. And that's what makes people stick and give discretionary effort, basically, which is where the money comes from. If you can get everybody to give 10 or 20% more, because that's where the productivity really,
So I do have a question for you, Fleming, because this has come up now multiple times in some of the conversations and dealer groups that I work with around employee evaluations. Because I think there's a big opportunity here to connect with an employee, lift them up, or it can just really drop and just destroy an employee's morale.
Right.
I had an opportunity recently to sit in on one, and man, I'm not going to lie, it was rough. It was actually really, really rough. And I felt a little bad for the employee. But I see so much value in employee evaluation. But I'm sure there are wrong and right ways to do it. I'm sure you've seen some great examples of doing it. And I'm sure you've seen some bad examples. What kind of advice can you give to people out there that are doing employee evaluations at their dealerships?
Well, and I think you know, if you wait like a whole year to do an annual review, you probably missed the moment. I think what we're seeing now is a lot more frequent employee, and I almost would call them employee coaching sessions, because what's happened is we don't want to tie the review to the pay raise, because then they stop hearing you. It's really about the pay for that annual review. So, when you really want to do performance reviews and set goals, I really recommend they do them more often and more frequently, so that the pay discussion is like almost, built on the year of information that we put together. That way they're hearing you, and they can do the coaching. Another area is where there's a real lack of clarity when I see goals and reviews, which makes it hard to do the review. So you can't manage what you don't measure. And a lot of times we're like, sell more cars.
Like that's the only goal, right?
Right. Yeah. Right. All right, get to 20. And so really it's about the activities of the day and managing the activities and where they're at in terms of what they're doing to get to that number. And so a lot of times that's where the work comes in for the leader. So that accountability part gets ignored. So it's like, today we need to catch, 8 more cars. And then everyone's like off to the races, but there's no real clarity about who's doing what, when they're going to come back to me, when they're going to ask for my help, what do they need to get there. So, I always make sure all the goals are those SMART goals, which I'm sure you've heard of, but the SMART goals mean, they're specific, like it's a very specific goal. It's measurable, because I don't want to be the bad manager. It's like you either exceeded the goal, you met the goal, or you're below the goal. It's a very factual conversation. It's not how I feel like you did. And then A is, it needs to be attainable. Like it can't be like, you got to go from 8 cars to 30 this month because I need to hit my numbers, right? So that's, and it needs to be like relevant to, they can't say they want every Saturday off as a goal. So it has to be relevant, but most importantly, it has to be timely. So T is timely, and it's like, do you put time restraints on it? Because Jason, if I say to you, hey, can you get this to me as soon as possible? That could mean to you right now, or it can mean to you, oh, you meant today, boss? So
yes,
a lot of times we're too busy to be clear as a leader. And then I think the secret to really effective performance reviews is you have to balance care with candor. And what I mean by that is you can't come into the review and just give the candor, right? And be like, you did this wrong and you need to fix this, without the employee knowing that you actually care about them. Because employees can take coaching and, performance improvement like plans if they feel like you really do want to help them get there. And so you do have to have the intention of not trying to get rid of them, unless you want to get rid of them. That's But I mean, like, they need to know that you care about them. So you have to have invested in the relationship building, the trust building, the helping them get there, so that they can hear the advice and, kind of take in. And then they need to leave that performance review with, they can do it. Not that they're under the gun, but it's like, you want to build in the belief with them that with them and you can help them get there, you can see them reaching these goals. So it sometimes is like, you have to go and make sure that mindset is in a positive place while you do
it really does have to be more of a side-by-side type effort.
Win-win.
I feel too often, a lot of managers, and I work with a lot of managers, they feel like they're almost kind of like dragging their team along. Like, I almost kind of picture like there's this rope and the team members are holding on to it, and the manager's just like, just come this way with me, and it's
exhausting.
It is exhausting, and it kind of leads into what we were kind of talking about earlier before we started recording, is kind of that burnout. And I think burnout happens for a lot of different reasons in a lot of different positions. But you said something earlier where, you really kind of focus on the efforts, not necessarily the results. I know we are such a result-driven, industry. I'm actually not necessarily all for the way our pay plans are structured, because they're so result driven. I mean, I played sports very heavily as a kid. I mean, for a very long time, and you focus on the efforts, and the efforts determine what your results were ultimately going to be. And
right.
but every single time I worked with a coach or somebody else, it was always working on those efforts and focusing on those efforts. And then of
The
course
drills and the, yeah.
exactly, and then of course the efforts are measurable.
Mm-hmm.
So, from a manager's perspective, now I'm managing a process that has a measurable element to it, and I'm not having to manage
More
the
than the end
person.
game.
Yes, I'm not having to manage the person with results. I don't burn out as quickly because I let the process manage the people, not me managing the people. So then I just have to focus on this ball that just kind of continues to push along. But I don't feel like we ever kind of get to that space, and then we ultimately kind of end up burning out. Do you see the same thing?
Well, and I think people are tiring. I mean, it's like being
Yes.
a parent of 20 people and they're, you got your babysitting hat on. I mean, and you may be a well-paid babysitter, but nobody is fulfilled with that. And I think,
You want to
what I
hear
love,
something
what
funny real
you
quick? The best manager I ever had was actually an ex-kindergarten teacher.
really,
I think there's something
that's
there.
hysterical. Yeah, that I have to think about that for a minute, what that means. But when you said, like, to me, managers manage things and leaders manage people. Like,
Mm-hmm.
leaders they have to be good at people. That's it, and getting people to want to do their very best and having the confidence to do their very best. And with that, if you get too caught up in, the results, people start to feel like cogs in the wheel. And I think that it's exhaustingly draining, especially to the managers, because
Mm-hmm.
leadership is a skill. And a lot of times we take our highest producer and we put them into management and we're like, congratulations.
We
And,
expect you to be
you
a
know,
leader.
and that is like, leadership is a long learning process. I mean, even if you've been doing it for a long time, you're still learning tricks of the trade, but there's a lot of skill set involved. And we take all these like new leaders and we just throw them to the wolves and say, get them to do what you did. And then that's a big shift, and it's all about me to it's all about them, and I have to get results through them. And so it's
Mm-hmm.
the only way people kind of feel comfortable is controlling it all. And when you're controlling and pushing and pulling, like you were just saying, you can't gain any more capacity. Like, how are you supposed to grow 20% when you have nothing left to give? Because you're already there, bell to bell, you're there all the time. They're draining every bit of energy out of you. And so you can't figure out how to build on that. And a lot of it is, are we getting the right people? Are we empowering the people? Are we developing and coaching them so they can take some of it off your plate,
Mm-hmm.
to free you up to do some fun strategic things that you haven't got to do? Because I think it's like, the day-to-day in and out that's burning out a lot of people in our
Well,
industry.
it is burning. And I also find what ends up happening is, and I've said this many, many times, it's a jack of all trades and master of absolutely nothing type scenario.
So much.
And it's just,
Yeah.
we wear all these bloody hats, and look, we have the intention of being the best manager, the best salesperson, or the best service manager. We want to be the best. But to your point, leading and managing are two entirely different things. And, if I was a salesperson gets promoted into a manager role, what they did as a salesperson, they did a great job of managing their own efforts to get the results that warrant them moving into this position. But just because they were able to manage themselves does not necessarily mean that they can lead others. Like it's
Well,
an entirely
especially like you
different
think
game.
about like top salespeople, they're young, like they've been like fighting it out with all these people, and now I'm supposed to take care of you. I mean, it's such a big like headspace switch. And so, it's like when I start working with a leader and we really look at what are you doing all day? Because it's really easy in
Mm-hmm.
our industry to be busy but not do your job.
We can push
And
paperwork all around all day long.
oh my gosh, like you can, and everybody, oh, I worked so hard. I did 60 hours. And I'm like, if I really sat in your store, and looked at what you did, that's where we break down. Where are we really being productive and using our
Mm-hmm.
time? And are you putting the right hat on? So there's many levels of leadership. And the one you just started with is like, you have the job, right? Like you get to boss people around now, but what you also don't get is it's a really hard job and you have to give a lot to get a lot. And then a lot of people get stuck there. And it's like, leadership is really about, building those relationships, building trust. People want to know, do you care about me? Are you going to help me grow? Can I believe in you? And do I matter? And that's we kind of skip over that step a lot and jump right into production. Move. I got to get my numbers. And the people don't feel.
It's the do you matter. It's the cornerstone, right?
Do you matter, yeah.
See, I mean, I love the fact that you said that, because
be nice.
like if we can get them to know that they matter to us, then we can build upon it. But you're 100% right. We just jump right past that whole section.
Yeah.
You know?
Well, and it's the industry push. I mean, it's the OEMs and pushing every month. Like they don't care that, I get hired a lot with the OEMs to work on retention. And, like we know it's, a huge issue. And we actually compile all the data for the NADA workforce study every year. So we get to do a lot of studies with some of the OEMs. So then they want to work on retention. But then they're kind of the problem. Sorry, OEMs.
Mm-hmm. No,
because they're creating this pressure of monthly that, we can't, it just puts so much pressure on the teams that they get so focused just on numbers instead of what they're building and what their brand is and, how the customer experience is going to go. So it's a hard cycle to break, and it takes a lot of framework to build a team that's the right people in the right place, that's empowered, and everybody's doing more than what we used to do 5 years ago, because the GM roles change. And so we have to empower all the rest of our managers. And then frankly, we got to start empowering our people. And they're like, I can't trust them to do that. And I'm like, why did you hire that person if you can't trust them with a customer? So there's a lot of different boundaries we have to put in terms of who is now an acceptable player, because the sales consultants have to be much more knowledgeable. We can't afford just to put 10 green peas on the floor and the customer now knows more than they do. So,
which I've always found that's totally unacceptable. But I mean, you've heard it, I've heard it.
Oh my goodness!
I can't tell you how many times it drives me nuts. It drives me nuts.
But I literally will be coaching a GM, and he's like, "Oh, I just had a recruiter get me 15 people." I'm like, "What?" I go, "Have we not talked about this?" And they just can't stop themselves because
it's that warm body. I just need a warm body. I want to run out of the dealership if I hear that.
No, I do. You want to hear some yelling? My poor GMs, when they do that, yeah, they're not getting my mama bear's mad.
I guess it's 4-letter words.
Yes. I'm like, okay, let's talk about how much money you spent right there. Because they always think, well, if it doesn't work out, I didn't really pay them. And I'm okay. So we did a study with NADA with some of all their 20 groups. Basically, we pulled all their KPIs and we tracked it to retention. Mm-hmm. And if you improve retention by 10%, it was a gross profit impact of $500,000, right? And guess what? Your job's easier too, because now you're keeping your people. Yeah. If it was a luxury brand, it was closer to 900, of course. But just think if you did 20%, and that's just putting in a good people strategy, a good leadership strategy. It's just putting a little bit more intentional effort on, instead of accepting that's just how it is and nobody wants to work here. And that's not true. There are some really great stores that don't have a turnover problem. And they also were growing 1 unit per month per person, by improving retention. So, I mean, there's some significant payback, and plus you get some of your life back. You get to be proud of the team you put together. You get to go on vacation with your family without worrying the store's imploding while you're gone. I mean, so I get it, though. It's a really hard cycle to break what we've built. And it takes, and that's why you and I have so much opportunity to work with so many people, because
it's what kind of keeps us going. But it was this is important, because we're kind of going back to what we were talking about earlier, was this burnout. It's how do we avoid that, right? And we have to be proactive, and that's really what we're talking about here. It's we have to create a long-term strategy here. And look, it's not only valuable for yourself as a leader and a manager within your dealership, but then there's the customer benefit of it. We love talking about the customer experience. I need a sound effect thing for that. I'm sure this board's got something.
You do.
I don't know.
Where's your team? Get them together. Yeah.
Maybe here we go. Well, I think this does it. Let's see. There we go.
Very good. I want one of those. Can I borrow that? Yeah.
But
I can do that when I'm talking to a GM. I'll just boo.
No, you can just use this one.
Ooh, very good. You do that in your free time, I can tell.
Yeah, it's a new tool, so it's just I'm playing with it. But no, I totally lost my train of thought. But no, going back to the experience, right? It's like we're constantly chasing this unicorn called the customer experience, and we seem to want to kind of like beat ourselves over the head with like this widget and that widget and this piece of technology and that trainer and this coach. And it's like, we want to like buy the experience. Like we want to buy it as a dealership. I'm going to buy it. I can go
we
buy
want the secret sauce. Yeah. We want
the,
I would say there's no secret pill here. It's hard work. Like you have to put in the hard work as the leader, and you have to build the team, and it takes time, and nobody wants to do something that doesn't like benefit them for 6 or 8 months, because that's how long it takes to turn a team around. And so they want the immediate. And so it's easier to buy the widget or the, like technology that's going to make your people happy and engage them. I mean, there's no secret there.
It's just hitting the easy button. We just want to hit the easy button, but it's the people that actually generate the experience, right? I mean, I had a little tiny Mitsubishi dealership. I owned a little tiny Mitsubishi dealership, but in my Mitsubishi dealership, I had 4 level 3 master technicians, triple diamond master technicians.
Nice.
There's only like 11 of them or 12 of them in the country at the time, right? Wow. So I was like, I was like, and that was going to be one of my backbones, was just like, this is what was going to be a differentiating factor from all of us, right? But so
you're ahead of the time.
Their happiness factor was a big one for me, because everybody wanted them to come work and steal them, right? So like I had to intentionally, and intentionally I think is kind of the key word that we're using here. Everything we're talking about comes down to the bottom line. You
make
be
a decision.
Intentional, right?
It's all doable.
I worked them out a 4-day work week. Everybody was pissed off because not a single other dealership could wrap their head around how they could work their technicians on a 4-day work week. And and they loved it. They absolutely loved it. They had 3 days to themselves. They had life. Obviously these technicians,
and they get more done in those 4 days.
They did. They really did.
Yeah.
And the way we scheduled things, our hours changed because of it. But, like I had a goal. The goal was simple. I needed them to stay happy, right? And so then I just kind of reverse engineer backwards from an operations perspective and said, what do I got to do, that is within a place of, profitability and range that I can control that will fundamentally make them happy. And taking that approach was great. Then taking that approach then with the rest of the staff, it just continued to get better, but every person was different, right? Like
yes,
these 4 technicians,
has different.
Everybody was different. These 4 technicians I had in the back, they've been in the business for a long time, so they were older. They didn't want to turn wrenches, 6 days a week. That was just not something they wanted to do anymore. They wanted to be able to have a 3-day weekend. Take their Sea-Doo out. And kind of spend some time with the grandkids and stuff like that, But every individual is different, and I tell this and I share this story to dealers, and then they just can't seem to wrap their heads about how they sit down with an individual and craft this out for them. And I'm sure you got some thoughts of this. So, what kind of advice can you give a dealership out there that's say they agree with us? Right, their staff's happiness is a key factor to an overall customer experience. But how do you take that one-on-one approach?
I mean, a lot of it depends, of course, on the size of the store, because you have more options. But to me, the big opportunity that everybody should be jumping on right now is teaching the public scheduling. I mean, we don't have to let them control that we're there all the time, bell to bell, whenever the whim. They schedule everything else, their doctor's appointments, their, the people. And right now, they don't want to come when it's all crowded. So they don't want to show up in the morning at 7 when your bays are full and they have to, be around all these people. And so you can have some better conversations if we teach the employees how to really set the calendar. And, my husband and I were just talking about it. He took the car in the other day and he said, they said to me, if I could do it this time, I'll be in and out. And he's like, of course I did that. And he's like, why don't they do that more often? And I'm like, so we have this fear that the public's not going to come with us. But if we teach our employees to teach the people a new way to deal with us, then you can actually schedule even the front around appointments that are coming in. I mean, of course, everyone's there Saturday, but like you can even do some 4 days stuff up front, just, have that be the crossover day. So it's just getting out of your own way and believing the myths we've all told each other over the years that, if we don't have people here, then the customers will just, do people do that anymore?
Yeah.
People don't like to go visit dealerships anymore. That's not a thing we do on Saturday. We pick the one or two, we call you 80 times, you don't return our calls, and then we finally have to show up. So we just have to think about doing it differently and getting different skill sets. And definitely looking at like, frankly, the millennials don't mind the crazy hours because they have really crazy schedules anyway.
For
But
sure.
it's more, do you care about their life outside of work? Do you make it easy for them to have a well-balanced life? So those are some of the things I tend to go in and tackle because they can get their arms around that. Can you bring the barber in? Can you bring the dentist in? Can you pick up their dry cleaning? Some of those things that if you're going to ask me to be here, you have to make my life work. So, but I also think now we've taken great pride in showing off that we worked 80 hours a week or 70 hours a week. And now I think even my GMs would like to go to their kids' baseball game.
Oh, look, I think everybody wants, like, when I first started in the car business, all right, there was no such thing as work-life balance.
No.
It just didn't exist. It wasn't really, it's just no one talked about it. You got into the business knowing that there wasn't anything like that. And now, people are talking about how do you capture new people coming into the business and how do you retain. And I think that's one of the biggest ways that you both capture new employees and retain existing employees is an actual work-life balance. And it's that lack of that work-life balance. It's always kind of focusing on the results and not focusing on the efforts that ultimately gets everyone to this burnout section. And, we kind of talked about this a little earlier. I'm not necessarily the best EQ in the world. So I don't necessarily identify when my team is burning out. In fact, I've made it very, very clear that you guys have to talk to me because I don't know if I can pick up the little signs that you're the nuances that you're burning out. What kind of advice can you give dealerships out there, that are having those issues? Because this affects happiness, this affects retention, this affects customer experience. Like, how do you identify burnout?
You ask them. I mean, unfortunately, so we do an employee survey. And the 5 questions, like we have slider questions that just do engagement, which is where we're going to pick out. Because a lot of times we ask, how much do they look forward to coming to work? Would they recommend it as a place to work to their friends and family? Would they recommend it as a place to buy a car or get their car serviced? Do they feel like, are they planning to stick around? And where we will pick up burnout is when they start scoring low on I don't enjoy coming to work anymore, and I wouldn't recommend it to my friends to come get a job. So what that will mean to me, and I'll be like, we need to really look at your work-life balance because you're burning out your managers here, you're burning out your employees.
Mm-hmm.
And,
Mm-hmm.
So it triggers what I call job jail, if that makes sense.
That's an interesting term. You have to elaborate on that one. That's a good one.
Well, I think a lot of people who've been in the industry for a while are making so much money that they can't afford to leave, but they really don't want to be there anymore.
Oh, so, yeah, no, I've seen this. Okay, I know exactly what you're talking about. I've seen this a lot.
So it's how do I re-engage them? And I think, so on the surveys, we ask a couple questions that are free to answer, So what's one thing we can do to improve the employee experience? What's one thing we can do to improve the customer experience? And you get some really good feedback. You get some things that we all get quite a laugh about because you're like, can't believe they wrote that here. Okay. But it's so insightful because employees really have an opinion. And so when we track retention, the number one thing that makes people stick around is, do you ask my opinion, which is an inclusivity question. You're including me.
Mm-hmm.
It means I matter. And so, we talked about how powerful questions are, but just by asking them through an employee survey, what do they feel and how can we make this a better place to work? People really get a lot of value out of being heard. And so, I am always a big proponent of doing some, you can do your own employee surveys. We survey like probably 40,000 dealership employees every year and run studies on what, is really causing them to be happy or not. And it's really, are you growing me? Do you care about me? Can I trust you? Do you do what you say you're going to do? And then do I really am I important? Do I matter? And so we have to focus more time around that, but you have to kind of see where they're at. Your intention, I know, as a leader is to really have a great team who's engaged and happy and delivers exceptional experiences to the customer. But the intention is not always, what's actually happening. And so we really got to fill in that gap between what you're intending to do and what's actually happening in the eyes of your people. And we just have to ask them how you feel. And if you're really good at taking feedback, then as a leader, I always try to get you to sit down and say, what can I do to be better?
Let's talk about that. Let's talk about that for a second, because that's actually come up pretty
Hard
recently.
question.
Is how do you receive and how do you take that feedback? I was with a dealer principal the other day, and we did actually, we're having the discussion kind of how we're attracting new business or new employees, new staff, and also what we're doing, what's the retention strategy with the current ones. Then of course I just kind of I said, don't you do employee reviews and surveys and stuff? Yeah, we stopped doing that a few years ago. Okay, why? And he gave me a general answer, a generic one, and then I pushed a little harder. It's still kind of a generic one. I pushed a little bit harder, and I finally got the real answer. It was like, I just didn't want to hear it. Like, that's what it kind of came down to, right? It's just like, I just don't care.
It's uncomfortable.
It's uncomfortable. How do we get into that mindset for the dealers out there that are listening right now? How do you get to that mindset where to be able to receive or take that feedback?
I mean, well, first off, it's hard. Nobody wants to hear, but what I will typically say, there comes a point where I'll be, a dealer we've been working with for years, and it's like the comment. So we also ask the question, what does this GM do well, and how can this GM be more effective, or how can this parts manager, we can dive. It's like kind of like a leadership 360. When you get that page, so that's an opt-in question. And I always look at what percentage of the people on your team took the time to say something good about you. When you get like where 80 or 90% of them are like, he's the best, or she always cares about what I'm doing, she's helped me grow, or he's, when you get that page, I'm always like telling them, I'm like, you print that out, put it in a frame, and when you're having one of those really crazy bad days at the dealership, you read that, because that's you did that. I mean, it's a privilege to lead people. And if you're not going to bother to commit to do it right, then you really shouldn't be in leadership. And so you have to pay the price to get to the perks. And
that's so true. There's not everybody is designed to be a leader, and not everyone's designed to be a manager. I think for a lot of people out there, they just have to be honest with themselves and say, "Is like, am I the right person to lead this?" And it's not necessarily wrong. You can be an owner and realize that you're better at managing efforts than leading people.
Operations
There's nothing wrong with that. I just feel like
plenty of money to be made there,
A lot of us, there's this level of just honesty with our upper management team, and just say, like, really, are we prepared for this? Are you the right person for this? Am I putting too much on you? Am I expecting you to be a leader and manager all at the exact same time? And those kind of sometimes conflict with each other. Look, Fleming, I know that we could probably go on this subject for quite some time. And this has been such an awesome episode. And I wanted to thank you in advance for taking the time to jam with us today. But before I let you go, for everyone out there that's watching and listening right now, would love to connect with you and your company and kind of follow along with you guys and learn more about what you do. What's the best way to do that?
So we can be reached on esitrends.com, and you can learn more about, all the profiles and surveys if you have interest in that. We also are starting a GM Academy, a new launch in January that's going to go through next year, where we're kind of every month handling different people strategies. What is your hiring process? How can you, hire the right salespeople? How can you, how do you have those difficult conversations? How do you set goals and performance management? So we'll be focusing on a people strategy and growing your leadership to grow your dealership. So that's exciting. We're really excited to launch that. And, if anybody wants to, if you want to do like a coffee and combo and ask your people for their opinions, I'd be happy to send you our set of questions that we give out to all of our leaders, just to kind of get this conversation started in terms of, what's a good way to, because some people aren't as comfortable really, opening people up. We're used to telling them what to do, but getting them, asking them good questions and being quiet is sometimes the hardest thing we have to do. So be happy to do that, or, LinkedIn with me. through you, everybody. So, we also have a monthly leadership newsletter. If anybody wants to sign up for that, just shoot me an email. It's Fleming, Fleming at esitrends.com. And I'd be happy to get you set up with that.
Those are some awesome resources. And anybody that's watching and listening right now, I definitely encourage you to check out those resources. We'll make sure to include a link for some of those resources in the podcast, in the comments down below. Fleming, thank you so much for taking the time to jam with me today. This has been a ton of fun. I'm sure we'll be doing this again soon, and hopefully sometime in person. That'll be even better. But
that'll be our cocktail hour with
absolutely. I'm in.
Cocktails and convo. Yeah.
That's one of my favorite words. So I'm there. Hey, thanks again, Fleming. You have yourself an amazing day.
Thanks, Jason.
Thanks for tuning in to the Strategy Mob podcast with your host, Jason Harris. Don't want to miss new content? Be sure to sign up to be a mobster at strategymob.com to stay in the know. Remember to like, comment, and subscribe.